Yes, am I visible? Yeah. Welcome to Venkanna Englishguru, and we were talking about Victorian writers. Yesterday we discussed one writer, Robert Browning. Today we are going to talk about 3 or 4 writers today. Okay. So second important writer is Alfred Tennyson. You know, as part of your Gurukula syllabus, there is a topic like Home They Brought the Warrior Dead. This poem is actually composed by Alfred Tennyson. So before talking about that poem, first we need to know some basic history. When we talk about Alfred Tennyson, in the examination you will get bits. Alfred Tennyson became poet laureate in Alfred Tennyson, who is the most and who worked as the poet laureate for too many years. Okay, for long period. Alfred Tennyson, like that you will get bits. And who is popular for who wrote In Memoriam? This is the bit. In Memoriam, which is written by Alfred Tennyson on the death of, like that you will get bits. Okay, and you talk about plenty of issues that we will be talking about. See, Alfred Tennyson and 1808 and 1892. Next, you can see he was the poet laureate. After the death of William Wordsworth, he became poet laureate in 1850, continued till his death till 1892. And he was the Britain, the most writer, and worked as the poet laureate during Queen Victoria's reign. Next, much of his verse was based on classical mythological themes such as Ulysses. Okay, so most of his literature is based on classical myths. Most of his poems are considered to be the saddest songs, the saddest lyrics, melancholy songs. Okay, that is actually the expression which is commonly used. As he is not married, hence, and he personally was in grief, in lamentation, in melancholy all the time, as there is no color to his life. Hence, he went on talking about these melancholical kind of poems in his literature. So, his poems are considered to be grief poems, sad poems, saddest songs, melancholy poems that we can say. Next, although In Memoriam, we need to understand, my friends, the longest pastoral elegy. Elegy, as you know, elegy refers to a poem that is written on the death of a person. Pastoral elegy refers to a poem that is written on the death of an important person. In Memoriam, which is written on the death of A.H.H., which means Arthur Henry Hallam. Arthur Henry Hallam. See, next, and he was actually a fellow poet and student at Trinity College, Cambridge. Okay, and he died at the age of 22. And to commemorate this friend, he composed In Memoriam. Who? Alfred Tennyson. Next, Tennyson also wrote some notable blank verse poems like Idylls of the King, very important poem, and Ulysses, Tithonus, Ulysses, Idylls of the King, popular songs that are composed by Alfred Tennyson in blank words. Blank words, as I told you, blank words refers to iambic, pentameter, no rhyme scheme. Okay. IPN, you can think iambic, pentameter, no rhyme scheme. That style is called blank words, introduced by Sir Thomas Watt. We discussed several times in the previous lessons. Next, Alfred Tennyson is popular for popular dialogues. Popular dialogues like, my friends, see, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Very popular quotation given by Alfred Tennyson, which means if you want to yield, if you want to succeed, if you want to receive something, what is required? Strive, you need to work hard. I want to get a job. No, it is not possible for you to get a job unless you work hard. If you want to have some yield, if you want to get something, first you need to do something. Okay, so you need to strive, you need to toil yourself, you need to work hard yourself, you need to seek, you need to request, you need to ask, you need to greet, you need to take information, and you need to find yourself. Then only, if these are not happen, there is no yield, There is no success, there is no gaining, according to Alfred Tennyson. See what a wonderful dialogue: to strive, to seek, and to find, and not to yield. Next, knowledge comes, but wisdom lingers. Knowledge comes based on when we read books, we will have a lot of knowledge. When we listen to somebody, we will have a lot of knowledge. But what will happen? Wisdom lingers, spreads. Popular dialogue. And he is considered to be the 9th most frequently quoted writer in the Oxford Dictionary of Quotations. 9th most quoted writers of English literature in Oxford quotations. And poet laureate, as you know, he became poet laureate after the death of William Wordsworth. And this fellow, Samuel Roger, actually refused to become poet laureate because Queen Victoria first requested Samuel Rogers to become poet laureate, but he rejected. He was not interested, hence Alfred Tennyson became poet laureate. Next, Tennyson was appointed as a poet laureate, but Elizabeth Barrett Browning, she was in contest. She wanted to be the poet laureate, but unluckily she wasn't. And he held the position until his own death, till 1892. The longest tenure, very important, my friends, in the history of net set JLDL examination you will get. Who worked as a poet laureate for a long time, and who worked as the poet laureate for the longest period in English literature? How many years? 42 years. And today all poet laureates for just 10 years only, from 19th century, 20th century onwards, 2000 onwards, and 1990 onwards. And most of the poet laureates started working for just 10 years. 10 years. What are his poems? For example, when we think about Idylls of the King, while the medieval missionary is restrained, not required, this is actually a comment on the contemporary life. Most of the poetry composed by Tennyson deals with sorrow, sad, lamentation, grief, melancholy, because he observes the social problems, political problems of the time, and he is not able to do anything because he is in the position of the government. He is not able to open his mouth. If he opens, he is not going to be the poet laureate. He will be removed and somebody will become poet laureate. Hence, he chose and he spoke about his internal ideas, those sorrow kind of melancholical kind of feelings in the form of poetry. Contemporary life, considered spirit of Victorian liberalism, very important one. And Alfred Tennyson is considered to be the spirit, because once you read the poetry composed by Alfred Tennyson, it deals with what is the spirit of the common Victorian, what they actually require, what they actually looking for. You will understand the moment you read the poetry composed by Tennyson. Tennyson was essentially the poet of law and order, because all poet laureates are law and poets of law and order, because they write official verses and they wrote literature. Those poems deal with law and order and progress of the country. Next, since every poet laureate does the same, Tennyson's poetry is often the vehicle of the spreading democratic sympathies of Victorian England, spreading the democratic spirit among the English people. And reckless, we need to understand, he is never married. Okay, reckless, bachelor, and aristocrat, very rich. Okay, next, he wrote literature about the common people and common things. Sometimes Alfred Tennyson is considered the poet of nature, but his nature is red in tooth and claw. Red in tooth and claw. That's a very popular dialogue. Next, see. He represents Victorian spirit of compromise, very important one. Victorian spirit of compromise. He was able to talk about whether to believe in the religion, whether to believe in science and technology. He was in a kind of dilemma and in a kind of compromise that is actually expressed through his poetry. Next, when he wrote a number of lyrical poems dealing with classical subjects. Next, and his word painting, and he also, in word painting, Tennyson followed the examples given by Keats and other romantic poets. And his view of nature is full of brutal struggle for existence. He finds nature very popular dialogue, my friends. Several times this bit was asked in the history of net, set, JL, DL examination. So he finds nature red in tooth and claw. Very popular dialogue this is, which means unable to express his feelings. Okay. Next, in memoriam, a long elegy, death song, funeral song, lamentation, saddest, okay, melancholy poem composed to, next, an elegy was peculiarly suited to Tennyson's melancholy reflective temper. Melancholy, to talk about his own melancholy, to talk about his own reflective temper, anger, he wrote, composed in memoriam. Next, what are some of, I am giving you only a few and little bit list, not complete list, important poems. Okay, see, from poems chiefly lyrical, Mariana, important poem. Mariana is a poem composed by J.L. Witt. Lady Clara Vere dire, and you can see the two voices enough. And very important one, Lotus Eaters, very important poem. Lotus Eaters is composed by Alfred Tennyson. This is composed in Spenserian stanza. What is Spenserian stanza? Spenserian stanza refers to a stanza of 9 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 lines. A stanza of 9 lines. Out of this 9, first 8 lines are composed in iambic pentameter. Iambic pentameter means every line includes 10 syllables. 10 syllables. And last line, iambic hexameter, which means 12 syllables. So 9 lines, 92 syllables. This is introduced into English literature by Edmund Spenser, and in his poem Fairy Queen. Later it was popularly used by The Castle of Indolence, Jim Thompson, another example, and Adonis by P.B. Shelley, Eve of St. Agnes by John Keats, Lotus Eaters by Alfred Tennyson. These are the best examples for Spenserian stanza. Several times, which of the following poem is composed in Spenserian stanza? Spenserian stanza refers to, how many lines are there? 9. Out of first 8 lines are composed iambic penta. Last line iambic hexa. Last line is also called Alexandrine. Several times in the history of net, set, JLDL, these are the common bits, my friends. Like that you may get a bit in your Gurukula examination. Next, these are some of the examples. Poems composed by, and another poems, Ulysses from the Princess. Next, Tears, Idle Tears, another important poem. Next, In Memoriam, which is addressed to Arthur Henry Hallam, from Maud, a monodrama. Next, Idylls of the King, another important popular poem composed by Alfred Tennyson. Next, Tithonus, another poem. The Brook, very important one. He goes on using the words like break, 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 broke, broken. These expressions. The word break indirectly talks about the sorrow, melancholic, grief, lamentation. Okay, that's what he goes on using. In this poem Brook, he makes this powerful statement. This statement is so important. For men may come, men may go, but I go on forever. Okay, people come and go, but I stay in this world for a long time. That is the statement he is trying to make. Men may come, men may go. People get birth and die, but I'll be remembered for a long time by the people. This is the statement made by Alfred Tennyson. Next you can see, and Beckett, another, Crossing the Bards, some of the other poems composed by Tennyson. Next, what is the theme? What is the theme and what are the themes and styles that are used by Alfred Tennyson? A wide range of subjects ranging from medieval legends, very important one, medieval legends, to classical myths. classical literature. The kind of myths that were used by Achilles, Sophocles, Plautus, Terence, Homer and Pindar and Horace, the kind of myths that they wrote, same thing which became a source for Alfred Tennyson to write literature. And domestic situations, which means he not only wrote literature about the classical subjects, he also wrote literature about the domestic, local political issues, local social issues were also discussed in terms of his poetry by Alfred Tennyson. Next, influence of John Keats, romantic poets, which we can identify. Next, he consistently uses the words break, 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 emphasizes the sadness of the subject matter. The process of, to talk about his sorrow feelings, he goes on using these phrases. Experimented in adapting quantitative meter, my friends. Meter, there are 4 types of meter in general: quantitative, syllabic, accentual and syllabic meter. In Telugu, Greek and Latin, we commonly use quantitative meter, because quantitative meter is based on the long and short sounds. We classify the words lines, and we analyze poetry. And in English, we commonly use accentual and syllabic meter. This is also called binary meter, which we can say. But Alfred Tennyson, he not only used accentual and syllabic meter, but also quantitative meter by employing Greek and Latin. You can see, by employing Greek and Latin poetry. Next, reflects Victorian period of his maturity, feeling of order towards moralizing. He wanted to create a moral world. He wanted to create an order in England. Reflects a concern for common among the Victorian writers, troubled by conflict between religious faith and expanding scientific knowledge. Very important one. Most of the writers during Victorian period, they had problems, they had a lot of conflicts with regard to whether to emphasize religious faith or to talk about scientific knowledge. And what was very important, some people gave much priority for scientific knowledge, some people gave priority for religious faith, and some people were in a kind of catch-22 situation whether to emphasize or not. That is the idea. That was also a kind of subject to the Alfred Tennyson. And his well-known poems, when we observe Maud, Idylls of the King. Next, his popular poems, you can say Mariana, Lotus Eaters, Tears, Idle Tears, In Memoriam. Okay, where he talks about his depression, his melancholical attitude. And you see, there are 2 important writers. One is T.S. Eliot, another one is W.H. Auden, who makes 2 revolutionary comments on Alfred Tennyson. And T.S. Eliot says, the saddest of all English poets is Alfred Tennyson. The saddest of all English poets. Tennyson is the saddest of all English poets. And there is no other saddest writer better than Alfred Tennyson. That is the statement made by T.S. Eliot. And you can see W.H. Auden. W.H. Auden made another opposite dialogue. The stupidest of all the English poets, the most stupidest poet of all in English literature is Tennyson. That is a revolutionary statement made by W.H. Auden. Both are modern poets. Okay, don't forget to subscribe our channel. Help your friends to inform to subscribe our channel, because as we are posting some basic kind of videos in our YouTube channel also, try to ask them to subscribe so that they will have more benefits to watch. Next, we will be talking about another important writer, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Very important one. Yesterday we discussed Robert Browning, and Elizabeth Barrett Browning means you are going to study a poem, The Cry of Children. The Cry of Children simply talks about child labor, talks about problems of child labor. That's what, my friends, Elizabeth Barrett Browning's poetry deals with 2 things. One is child labor, one is talking about the problems, abolition of slavery, child labor, and second one is women's rights, women's freedom, women's individuality and women's autonomy in terms of writing literature, because that was a major problem during Victorian period. That is discussed by and Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Elizabeth Barrett Browning, as you know, she is elder to Robert Browning for 7 years, and her son name Robert Barrett Browning. What is autobiographical novel composed by Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Aurora Leigh, and she is popular for a popular sonnet cycle, sonnet sequence, sonnets from Portuguese, my friends, a very popular poem, a collection of sonnets composed by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. These are very important, and where she talks about a wonderful poem like How Do I Love Thee? How do I love thee? You know, lovers usually elope to Italy, and the couple eloped to Italy, stayed there, and she died in Florence due to tuberculosis, lung related problems. Common bits, my friends, simple basic things that you need to get. See, so Elizabeth Barrett Browning, 1806 and 1861, which meant she lived for just 55 years and was the most prominent of English poets, and she was the eldest of 12 children, and she had, when she was just 15, became ill, intense head and spinal pain. The rest of her life she had these problems, and later in life she developed lung problems, died of tuberculosis. So John Keats died of tuberculosis, D.H. Lawrence died of tuberculosis, Robert Louis Stevenson died of tuberculosis, and Elizabeth Barrett Browning died of tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is the common problem that is common in England due to environmental kind of issues, and mainly in Scotland. Next, she was introduced into English literature by John Kenyon, and the greatest literature period was 1841 and 44. Okay. Next, very important one, what was her literature about? Her literature about the abolition of slavery, reforms in the child labor legislation. Based on the poems composed by Elizabeth Barrett Browning and the novels composed by Charles Dickens and William Thackeray, the Britain Parliament introduced right to education, right to free and compulsory education, and the midday meal. These kinds of programs for the first time introduced by the Britain Parliament in 1867. The Free Education Bill, the Right to Free and Compulsory Education Bill, was first introduced in 1867 in England by the Britain Parliament, based on the writings composed by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, Charles Dickens, and William Thackeray. Remember, my friends. And her prolific output, and she became a rival, because he wanted to be the poet laureate, and she was also in the race to become poet laureate. Next, and she composed poems, and this is which we can say sonnets from Portuguese, and Robert Browning was admired, and Robert Browning was fascinated by reading these poems composed by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and he wrote a letter to her also, and they had close relationship, courtship, marriage, and her father disapproved their marriage, hence the couple left to elope to Italy, and where Italy in 1846, and there she gave birth to Robert Barrett Browning, and they called the son with the name Pen, and she died in 1861 in Florence in Italy. Okay, due to tuberculosis. We need to understand. Robert Browning was able to enjoy his family life for just 7 years. 7 years. See the danger, and he was the only writer who is never married after the death of his wife. Okay, and next, collection of her last poems was published by her husband, and her works were greatly inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. Edgar Allan Poe is one of the writers. He is considered to be the originator of short story, and Emily Dickinson, a popular writer and popular writer of realistic period of American literature. Next, she is also remembered for such poems, How Do I Love Thee? See, my friends, How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love you with my smiles. I love you with my tears. I love you during my life. I love you better than even after my death. See the lines that she uses. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love you in smile. I love you in tears. I love, like she goes on making a wonderful comments. And sonnets from Portuguese, it's all about love songs. Okay, next sonnet 43. And Aurora Leigh, as I told you, Aurora Leigh, this is the autobiography in prose. So sometimes we can say autobiographical novel, Aurora Leigh. Next. And she received comfort from a spaniel named Flush. Okay, gift from Mary Mitford. Virginia Woolf, very important one. Virginia Woolf was a popular writer of 20th century. 20th century popular feminist in English literature. And she wrote the biography of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and the title is Flush, a biography in 1933. Very important one. Who wrote the biography of Elizabeth Barrett Browning? Virginia Woolf. What is the title? Flush, a biography in 1933. This is very important. Next, this is the greatest time of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and the poem that we are going to talk about as part of our syllabus, The Cry of Children. The Cry of Children. This is about child labor. First published in 1842. This is very important. Child labor is, The Cry of Children is published in 1842. Remember, Cry of Children is published. It's about child labor. It's about and child labor reforms by raising support for Lord Shaftesbury's 10 Hours Bill. Actually, during this, the Poor Law Act became popular in 1833. According to that act, we need to work every worker and was asked to work for 20 hours a day. And it became very difficult for most of the working class people, and they protested. And Lord Shaftesbury, he recommended for, instead of working for 20 hours, and he decreased, okay, normally a worker can work for 10 hours. This is the bill which was introduced by Lord Shaftesbury. In support of that, she wrote this poem, The Cry of Children. Today you can see labours, once you go to any hub, adda, and what is the timing? Morning 10 to 4, 10 to 5, 8 hours, just for 8 hours. They work, and if once you ask them what is the payment that they get, 800, 600, 700. For men they get one kind of wage, for women they get another kind of wage. That's what. In those days, Lord Shaftesbury, who in support of the workers and introduced the bill of 10 hours bill, and to support that she wrote this poem in support of that. Next, her prolific output made a rival to Tennyson. She became a rival as she wanted to be the poet laureate, and Robert Browning and Italy, they had very close love and affair, and she expressed her love towards him in the poems Sonnet from Portuguese, volumes, poems made her, and where he, I love your verses with all my heart. This is the statement made by Robert Browning after reading Sonnet from Portuguese. Barrett Browning's first known poem was written at the age of 8 on the cruelty of and forcement to men. Her first publication was Stanzas excited by reflections on the present state. Next, her first collection of poems, an essay on mind, published in 1826. And another important concept is she translated Achilles, Sophocles, Plautus, Terence, Pindar. All these were popular dramatists, classical writers that you are aware. One of the classical writers, Achilles, he wrote Prometheus Bound. Who is author of Prometheus Unbound? P.B. Shelley. Prometheus Bound, Achilles. And this Prometheus Bound, written by Achilles, translated by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Remember this. This was published in 1833. Next. Next, Elizabeth opposed slavery usually. Her literature is all about against slavery, and published two poems highlighting the barbarity of slavers and her support for abolition of cause. That's what. During 1850-1860, there is a lot of slavery and barbarity. This is identified by the Britain Parliament based on the poetry written by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Next, the date of publication not required. This is also not required. Next, Seraphim and other poems, and Sonnet from Portuguese, which is very important. It's a debate of origin of the title, and published in 1850, started in 1844, completed in 1850, and this includes 44 sonnets and 43 sonnet. How do I love thee? Several times it was asked. Next, he, my little Portuguese. This is the nickname given to Elizabeth Barrett Browning by Robert Browning. Next, it's a pet name. And Aurora, Leigh, you need to understand, this is the prose most, this which we can say at Aurora, Leigh, this is the words novel, a very important one. It is the story of a female writer making her way in life, work and love, and based on Elizabeth's own experiences. That's what, my friends, what is the autobiography of Elizabeth Barrett Browning? Aurora, Leigh. Is it composed only in the form of poetry, words? No, it is words novel. Okay, remember. Sonnet from Portuguese, Aurora, Leigh, very important works by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Next, you can observe what are the popular works composed by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. The Battle of Marathon, An Essay on Mind, Prometheus Bound, very important this is. Next, the Seraphim, poems, and the Sonnet from Portuguese. This is very, very important. Sonnet from Portuguese. Next, some of the other poems which we can see, and very important one is Aurora, Leigh, autobiography. That's it, and the remaining aspects are not required. Okay, remember this. Okay, next we'll talk about another writer. Do we have the time? Yes, let me check. Wait for a minute so that yes, am I visible? Am I visible to you guys? Am I visible to you? Oh.